Apple Floppy Days, Commodore Tandy Floppy Days, Atari TI Floppy Days. The weekend comes, the disk drive hums, ready to code for you. These days we're all happy and free. Those floppy days, the games we play, you shared with me. Those days, Motorola, Intel 6502, graphics and text are there to view. Composite, color, or RGB, program fun for you and me.
Floppy Days is recorded in a live studio.
Inside PC Floppy Days, ST Amiga Floppy Days, Junior Sinclair Floppy Days, Classic Days, Microwaves, geeking all week with you. These days we're all happy and free. Those floppy days, the games we play, you shared with me. Those days, these floppy days are yours and mine. These floppy days are yours and mine. Floppy days.
The TRS-80 Model 3.
Introducing the Apple IIc.
Atari 1040 ST.
Commodore 64. What?
PC Junior, new from IBM.
Discover Atari.
It's at his Radio Shack Color Computer 3.
Introducing the Timex Sinclair 1000.
The thru computer, this is the one. Texas Instruments home computer.
A wonder computer of the 1980s, the Commodore VIC-20.
Hello and welcome to episode 145 of the Floppy Days Podcast for November 2024. I'm very happy to be with you today, and I am Randy Kindig, your host for this audio tribute to the amazing variety of home computers that existed in the late 70s through the 80s, before the influence of Big Blue changed the landscape forever. This month, I'm happy to bring you another in the continuing series of interviews I've been doing recently with Paul Terrell. As we have discussed, Paul Terrell is a name well known in the annals of computer history, probably most famously for his kickstart of Apple Computer through the purchase of one of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak's first batches of Apple I computers for Paul's Byte Shop. The Byte Shop was a very early computer store that was one of the few that existed in the world at that time. In this interview, we continue to focus primarily on the Byte Shop, how it got started, what it was like, and much more. This is part 4 of a 4-part series on just that topic with Paul. If you want to know what it was like to run a computer store in those early days, then you probably want to listen to this interview. Along the way, you'll learn even more about just what the home and hobby computer scene was like in those days. Very interesting. In future episodes, Paul and I will discuss other topics around his long and distinguished career, such as the aforementioned dealings with the fledgling Apple computer and other ventures in which Paul was involved after the Byte Shop, including a business that rented software. Before we go on, let's not forget to mention some of the great storefronts that support our vintage computing hobby in a big way. First up is 8bitclassics.com, run by my friend Corey Colts. He has a lot of different vintage computer items, including video cables, power supplies, cartridges, upgrades, and a lot more for a wide variety of vintage computer platforms. I often get items from 8-Bit Classics, and I talk about them on this show. Corey's been a friend of the show for some time. I actually met him at one of the Vintage Computer Festivals, Vintage Computer Festival Midwest, actually. And I really appreciate his support of the podcast. Check out his site. He has some great stuff. Another site is arcadeshopper.com, run by my friend Greg McGill. He really has a truly wide variety of hard-to-find items for a large number of platforms. Greg really tries to cover as many different platforms as he can. This is another site that I do and have done a lot of shopping at, and have mentioned numerous times on Floppy Days. The great thing is, too, that if anything shows out of stock, you can just ping Greg through the contact form, and he can check whether he has or can get more of that item for you. And finally, FutureVision Research. This one is managed by my friend Brian Cox. If you're in need of a FujiNet for any of the official platforms, like the Apple II, the Atari 8-bit, the Coco, or the Coleco Atom, Brian has what you need. He also has some cool soldering kits for whatever skill level you're at, including beginner, and which I have a full set of and am planning to spend some time on here before long. I also want to mention those listeners who appreciate the show enough to donate through patreon.com. I really appreciate you guys, and it helps offset the cost of running the podcast. And since I haven't mentioned for a while the supporters, I'm going to run through their names real quick here as a sign of appreciation. And those are B. Adams, Chris Tornada, Ken Partridge, Southern Amos, BBS, Rob Snyder, Brian Cox, Stanley McMahon, Paul Nermanen, Carl Atrell, Scott Lewis, Gare Eilerston, Gary Heather, Ost, Brendan Donahue, Richard Goldstone, Quentin Barnes, Simon McCullough, Brent Carroll, Tony Capolini, and Jason Moore. Again, thank you so much, guys, for supporting the podcast through Patreon. Regarding that, as I've mentioned on the past several shows, I've created some tiers for paid members, and I've come up with ways to reward those who are generous enough to monetarily support the podcast on Patreon, such as early access to videos of interviews like the one being brought to you in audio form in this episode. Visit patreon.com to see more details concerning the rewards for supporters. I just want to say that it's my intention to always make all content available to everyone at no cost, while at the same time providing some benefits for those generous enough to support the podcast. I hope you agree I've come up with a good compromise. Please let me know your thoughts and enjoy the rest of this episode.
Hi, this is Paul Terrell. Here's to the followers of Floppy Days, with a passion of the past events that ignited the personal computer revolution, from someone that was there at the time and a willing participant. I was involved in the first sales of Microsoft Basic to Data Terminals and Exidy Incorporated, which created the first software company in personal computing. And I bought the first 50 Apple I computers with a COD purchase order, which provided $25,000 of seed capital to start Apple Incorporated. The personal computer revolution is as significant as the Industrial Revolution was, and they say history repeats itself. A generation which ignores history has no past and no future. If you want to understand today, you have to search yesterday. So let's understand today with Floppy Days podcasts of yesteryear. Thank you.
All right, now for new acquisitions and what I've been up to. So the first thing I want to talk about, and on which I've been spending an inordinate amount of time lately, is a computer rescue. By my count, this is about the fifth one that's come my way since I retired 2 years ago. As frequent listeners will know, back in 2013, I published episodes 8 and 9 containing interviews with David and Teresa Welsh, authors of the book Priming the Pump, How TRS-80 Enthusiasts Help Spark the PC Revolution. Before the Tandy Assembly Show each year, I always contact David and Teresa about possibly having them attend the show. They attended the show a few years ago, and it was fantastic to meet and talk with them. I keep them informed every year in the hopes that they might be able to attend again. I did the same this year and had difficulty contacting them as my emails were bounced. Finally, I was able to contact their daughter Amy and found that David and Teresa were experiencing some health issues, and that's why the contact info I had was no longer working. In addition, it was mentioned that David and Teresa no longer had the need nor the room for much of the vintage computer stuff they had and was looking to get rid of it. I offered to help them with that and to make the trip to the Detroit, Michigan area to pick up whatever they didn't want or need. They gratefully accepted, and I started to make plans to make the trip. While I didn't have any way to pick up the stuff, not owning a truck or a trailer, I knew that my friend Simon had both. I asked him if he was willing to make the trip, and he indicated he was. So we made plans for an overnight trip. It's a 5-hour trip from my home, and even more for Simon, to visit the Welshes and pick up what they didn't want. When we got there, we discovered that they had a large amount of primarily, as you might guess, TRS-80 stuff in their basement, and it was stuffed to the gills. However, there was a large amount of non-TRS-80 stuff as well. In addition, there were numerous books, magazines, software disks, cartridges, printers, etc. As a reminder, or if you didn't know, David and Teresa ran a business for several years out of their home, developing, selling, and supporting what was primarily a word processor for the TRS-80 Model 1, 3, and 4 called Lazy Writer. Here's a partial list of the items that Simon and I ended up taking with us. 3 TRS-80 Model 1s, 5 matching monitors, 3 expansion interfaces, and a disk drive. 1 TRS-80 Model 3, also a TRS-80 Model 4, a Lobo Max 80 TRS-80 Model 1, 3, and 4 compatible, which I'll talk about more in a minute, a TI-99 4A, some Cocos, actually Coco 1, 2, and 3, an Apple II GS, an Atari 400 with replacement keyboard. There were lots of magazines and books covering numerous systems, numerous peripherals such as printers, a Voltrax speech synthesizer for the Model 1, a multi-cart for the Coco, a 5 megabyte Tandy hard drive, and a Fred. On the software side, there were numerous Coco cartridges and cassettes, numerous discs, manuals, and cassettes for the Model 1. And there were 1.5 boxes of unsold Priming the Pump books. We also pulled out a Tandy Model 100 from the stuff that they had, but Teresa, after taking a look at it and playing with it for a little bit, decided she wanted to keep that one, so that's great. One of the machines I mentioned that really excited me when I saw it is the Lobo Max 80. As I said, it's a TRS-80 compatible, not a clone, because the insides are substantially different. And it has a huge number of ports built into it, negating the need for the expansion interface for the Model 1 and allowing connectivity to serial and parallel devices, as well as to 5.25 and 8-inch floppy drives. This one turned out to work. They are built like tanks and are heavy, but it needs a new battery installed for the real-time clock and needs some keyboard work. I purchased a new battery, which will need soldered in, and a keyboard puller cleaner kit to get the keyboard fully working, I hope. I had never heard of the Max 80 prior to finding this one, so I'm excited to learn more about it. It also turns out that this machine was released in 1982, which happens to be the year I'm currently covering on Floppy Days. So I'm planning to add to the Max 80 to the list of machines I will be covering on its own episode. I've already been on the Tandy Discord channel and found others who own a Max 80. Tim Halloran was even kind enough to loan me a Gotek that he configured to connect to the Max 80 and have it boot into DOS or CP/M. One interesting thing about the Max 80 is that it does not have BASIC built in, unlike the TRS-80, and thus you can't boot it at all without a floppy drive. I ended up keeping one of the TRS-80 Model 1s. It was a 4K Level 1 machine, just like the first one I ever owned, and one of the monitors. I also will be keeping the Model 3 and the Max 80. I promised David and Teresa I would help them get their remaining copies of Priming the Pump sold. There are about 75 new copies of them, and it's my plan to take them to various computer shows next year, as well as other potential avenues to help them get sold. Please let me know if you're interested in a copy of the book. Just email me at floppydays@gmail.com and we'll work out a deal for one. These will be the last new copies of the book that you'll ever be able to get. Simon and I are still cleaning, testing, and doing work on these machines. I'm also still organizing the books, magazines, and software, many, but not all, of which are TRS-80, and figuring out which magazines might need to be scanned and archived. I'm even going to be adding a couple of shelves to my built-in bookcase in my office to make room for some of these items. I want to thank David, Teresa, and their daughter Amy for being gracious hosts as Simon and I invaded their home, and it was a blast getting to talk with them again and listen to their stories. I also wanted to let them know that we're honored they were willing to share their robust computer history with us, and that we will make sure every item has a good home. The other thing that I want to talk about in terms of new acquisitions and what I've been up to is has to do with a calculator. So as many of you know, I love programmable calculators as well as vintage computers, and there are certain machines that pique my interest. I have a collection of the most common of those, like the TI-59, which is one of my first podcasts, and the HP-41, and several more. For some reason, I took an extreme interest in the HP-97 recently, and have been on a mission to acquire one at a price less than the exorbitant going rate for many of these machines on eBay. Luckily, recently, I found one on eBay, while obviously well used and in need of cleaning, included the custom charger and had pictures of the display working. It still was going for a bit more than I wanted to pay, but I made a more comfortable buy it now bid and was a little surprised to have it accepted. Here's a bit about the HP-97. So the HP-97 and the HP-67 were introduced as a match set. The 97 had a printer, a larger case, and a much larger battery pack. Otherwise, they were functionally equivalent. The desktop version with built-in thermal printer was sold as the HP-97 at a price in those days of $750. Collectively, they are known as the HP-67/97. They were marketed as improved successors to the HP-65. The two models, the 67 and 97, are functionally equivalent, and programs on magnetic cards can be interchanged between them. The HP-67 is powered by a pack of 3 AA-sized nickel-cadmium rechargeable batteries. Because the 97 requires more power due to the built-in thermal printer, it has a larger battery pack and a more powerful charger. When purchased, as with almost all of these old calculators of any brand, the card reader and printer have had parts deteriorate and need work to get those functions working. I've had the same issues with my TI-59 calculators, the card reader specifically, and the HP-41 calculator, also the card reader. You can buy kits to refurbish those functions, and I did that as far as purchasing the kit for my TI-59, but haven't yet mustered the time or courage to actually do the work. Another option, at least for the HP-97, is to send the machine to someone that knows how to refurbish them. These are not inexpensive calculators, so I opted to go that route in order to get a fully working machine. I've found a gentleman on eBay His handle is Waterhosko, Waterhosko, aka Mark Hoskins, who offered a refurbishment service for a reasonable fee. I quickly sent off the machine to him after testing that the machine indeed turned on and was able to perform simple functions, and crossed my fingers that he could get it fully working. He very quickly performed some work on it, told me it was now good to go, both the printer and the card reader, plus some basic cleaning, sent me some photos, and popped it back in the mail to me. When I got the machine, I found that the power supply I had appeared to be inadequate to run the machine sans the battery pack. Mark quickly responded to my plea for help and sent me a fully charged battery pack for the machine. I popped that in and the machine worked beautifully. Mark told me it's always best to run the calculator off a battery pack rather than the power supply alone, and the power supply is used to charge the battery pack as needed. Mark included a magnetic program strip containing a test program for the HP97. That gave me the opportunity to not only test the refurbished card reader, but also to learn how the cards work on this machine. I'm very glad I went this route, as I now have a fully working machine, and I can work on getting the other pieces to this that I need, like a paper copy of the original manual, the leather carrying case, and the standard pack to start. This will be fun to play with and makes a great addition to my vintage calculator collection. It also doesn't take a lot of room to store or to display. As a result of this acquisition, I will be doing a future episode on this particular calculator, even though it was released much earlier than the timeline where I'm currently at. I hope you'll allow me departure from the normal timeline. On occasion, I think it makes sense to do a one-off like this that got missed in the timeline. Stay tuned for that episode. And that's it for what I've been up to this month.
My name is Forrest Mims. I've written many electronics and scientific books and articles, and I co-founded MITS. I also wrote the first manual for the Altair 8800 computer. You're listening to the Floppy Days Podcast.
Okay, now is the section where I talk about shows, computer shows that are coming up, and we're near the end of 2024, so there's only a couple remaining in this calendar year, but I'm going to start giving you information about shows that are occurring in 2025. In particular, right now, I'm going to tell you about shows that run through April, so that gives you a chance to plan for attending one or more of those shows. First up, still in this year, is Silly Venture Winter Edition, December 5th through the 8th in Gdansk, Poland. At the same time, or at least part of that time, will be Atari Party 2024. It is December 7th from noon to 4 at the Quakertown train station in Quakertown, Pennsylvania. This is the only Atari-only show that I'm aware of that exists in the U.S., so if you're an Atari enthusiast, you might want to try to attend. Now, getting into 2025, the Vintage Computer Festival Southern California is February 15th through the 17th at the Hotel Farah Event Center in Orange, California. This will be the second edition of this. I went to the one in 2024. Had a great time in the LA area. We went to Disneyland as well. Made a whole week trip out of this, and it was a great time. It was a great show, and I certainly encourage you to go if you can attend. The Midwest Gaming Classic is April 4th through the 6th at the Baird Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I've not yet attended this show, but I'm sure it's a lot of fun. VCF East is the same weekend, unfortunately. April 4th through the 6th in Wall, New Jersey. And the Indie Classic Computer and Video Game Expo will be the following weekend, April 12th through the 13th at the Crown Plaza Airport Hotel in Indianapolis, Indiana. I am involved in organizing this, and this will be the third edition of this show. And that's it. That's all I'm going to cover for now. I'll start covering more shows that are occurring in 2025, but that's a good number to start with and for you to start making your plans. Hope to see you at one or more shows. So that's it for upcoming shows in 2024 and early 2025.
All right. So hi, this is Ed Smith. I'm the person who was a part of the video game and personal computer design team at APF Electronics in New York. We developed the MP1000 video game, and we developed the Imagination Machine personal computer. And I am happy to say that this has been an excellent discussion with Randy on the Floppy Days podcast.
Okay, next up is the Meet the Listener segment, which is a new segment of the show. This segment this month comes from my friend and supporter of the show, Simon McCullough. Before we get into it, I want to remind everyone that I really would like you to join the segment. All you have to do is produce a 3 to 5 minute audio file where you introduce yourself and your vintage computer journey. Tell everyone how you got started with vintage computers, what you had back in the day, how you got back into the hobby, what vintage machines you have today, etc. Then just send the audio file to me at floppydays@gmail.com, and I'll publish it on a future Floppy Days episode. If you're not comfortable in recording the audio file yourself, feel free to let me know. I will call you up on Skype and we'll get it recorded. Thanks in advance, and I can't wait to hear your story. Now, here's Simon's story.
Hi, my name's Simon McCullough. I thought I'd try a short recording for Meet the Listeners. I've had an interest in old computers for quite a long time and started saving old computers around 93. The first computer I ever really touched was a Timex Sinclair 1000. Back then I was in the Army and a friend, John Marshall, got one. He had it in the barracks and everyone was looking at it. He showed me how to type in "Hello World" and I caught the bug. I wanted one, but not necessarily the Sinclair. I have a couple very specific memories from that machine. First, I remember him bragging that this thing has 2K RAM. I said, I don't know what that means. And he said, well, it's twice as much as the old model and more than we'll ever need. Second, I remember the keyboard. I had used manual typewriters, some Royal Electrics, and even an IBM Selectric. I knew that you wanted one of the IBMs if you could get it. But this Sinclair membrane keyboard was bad enough that the memory stuck with me. It had no feedback, and it was hard to figure out what combination of keys to push. But hey, I didn't know. Maybe this was just how computers were. Well, John lived in the barracks and I didn't, so I didn't get much time with the Sinclair, but enough to know that I didn't want that keyboard and that there were better options out there, even keyboards like the IBM typewriter. Later that year, the VIC-20 went on sale for $99. The VIC-20 had a full-size keyboard that reminded me of the IBM Selectric. Who would think today that the keyboard was a major selling point for a computer? But it was for me, so I got one with the cassette package. I took the VIC-20 to Germany when the Army transferred me. I spent what little spare time I had teaching myself BASIC from the manual, and I was working on my very own version of Breakout. I got it sort of working, but it was painfully slow. I spent time trying to speed it up and make it playable, but never really succeeded. Over time, I got a few cartridges. I recall Gorf and Qbert, Cosmic Cruncher, and Omega Race. In those days, I didn't know that Avengers was Space Invaders, but Gorf filled that gap pretty well. And who doesn't love Omega Race? And it played great on my black and white TV. Later, while still in Germany, my neighbor got the newer Commodore, a 64. He had the Christmas demo, and I remember seeing the snow falling on the Commodore logo. I remember the animation. I really wanted to move up to that. But real life got in the way, and the Army kept me busy, way too poor to get anything new. And the Vic went into storage when I came back from Germany and never really came out. And back in the U.S., I started taking night classes. One of my early classes had us writing programs in BASIC. These were written on a teletype and stored in the mainframe. Paper tape was there, but we didn't have to use it. There was no monitor, just typing everything out on green bar paper. Any error you made, the whole line had to be completely retyped. My VIC-20 background actually helped me a lot. I mean, I missed the on-screen editor of the Commodore. As simple as it was much better than the teletype. Later at the Engineering and Technology building, they got a couple IBM PCs. They were locked up in their own small rooms. And you could only sign them out for 20-minute time slots. I used them several times. It was hard to get a time slot, but you really could edit and test your program much faster. I got out of the Army in the mid-'80s, and my college classes stopped. I didn't get back to college until the early 90s. By then, the whole computer world had changed. While they still used the main server, we connected mostly with IBM clones. The School of Science did have several labs with Unix stations. I took a C class on Unix. Around this time, I got an IBM clone for home and could even dial into my account at school. Around 93, I went to an auction that the college was having. I picked up several old computers there. As I recall, I came home with a Zenith, several monochrome monitors, and 3 IBM 5150 PCs, and a couple clones and a couple portables, all in various states of not working. I kind of cite this as when I started collecting old computers. Like many of you, I was the computer guy. You know how that was. If friends or family needed help or to upgrade, I got the call. I got exposed to several different computers helping them out. One of my sisters had an original TRS-80. A brother had a Franklin Ace Apple clone. Another sister had a VTech Laser XT clone. I eventually ended up with many of these. As they each upgraded over time, I found myself with not much time to spend with these computers, though, but I did continue to accept them. If someone was getting rid of them, sort of a rescue, but work and travel kept me away from them. Around 10 years ago, I changed jobs. This pretty much stopped the travel and slowed down the fast pace at work somewhat. My children were all out of the house, so I started spending a little time with the computers again. At this point, as far as my family knew, I was just some crazy guy who collected old computers. I mean, who does that, right? Then for Christmas, my wife gave me a boxed Commodore 64. She knew that I'd always wanted one, and this lit the fire again. I learned about modern upgrades and eBay. I later got a Commodore PET CBM 8032 and learned about not shipping anything with a monitor. It arrived with a CRT imploded. I started looking for a replacement that I could drive to pick up. I found one an hour away in Cincinnati and made the drive. This turned out to be another turning point in my hobby. While talking to the very nice gentleman, he asked if I listened to the Floppy Days Podcast. That Floppy Days guys is from Indiana. After a quick search with his help, I found Randy's podcast. This was the first podcast of any type that I'd ever listened to. I eventually started working through the backlog. I learned that Randy was trying to set up a local club, made contact, and he confirmed that yes, it did in fact happen, and the group was meeting monthly at the library in Lebanon. I started going. Now I have way too much stuff and way too many projects, and anyone will tell you that I usually bring too much to the meetings. I'm interested in almost all old computers. I have many of the Tandy TRS-80s, I have Atari 8-bits and STs, some K-Pros and other CPM machines, MSX and other Japanese machines, Apple IIs and some early Macs, and many DOS machines, including IBM 5150 PC, and a few other odds and end items. I have a collection of VTech computers, and I have many Commodore machines. I like all the Commodores, but I'm partial to the VIC-20 and the 64. The computer club and all the people in it have been great. Now, since I'm not alone in this hobby, I guess I'm not just a crazy guy keeping old computers. Now I'm a member of an eccentric group of vintage computer collectors.
Okay, now we have the interview with Paul Terrell with the final discussion with him about the Byte Shop. Enjoy. So you had, I know franchising was a big part of what you were doing. And did you make it pretty easy for people to become a franchise, I guess, for your store?
Yeah, it was, once again, given that time frame, we're back in the 70s and people, when you looked at our customers and actually eventually computer store owners, if you looked at the complexion of that individual, they didn't have a lot of cash. They were typically working for another company, and then they had this hobby of computers and interest, and then all of a sudden they had a business. They created a store for it. So the price to get into a Byte Shop dealership, I was trying to keep very reasonable, and so to buy a dealership was a $20,000 investment for you. And in contrast to Computerland with their franchises, they were about $100,000, and so they were looking for people that had money, and your typical McDonald's, Burger King, those kind of owners, people that are looking, to do multiple stores and franchise and so forth, their territories. But with the Byte Shop dealerships, I was looking for you to have $20,000 that you could give to me, and then what I would do is give you back product for that $20,000, and then the fees that I was charging, rather than a franchise fee, I had a what I called the dealership fee, and so your ongoing fees to me would be a 5% of what your purchases were. So I would, if you bought $100,000 worth of product from me, you would pay me a fee for that of $5,000, on 100,000. So once again, be very reasonable, in terms of what you got for that. Okay, and I gave you product, whereas once again, going back to Computerland, that you weren't getting anything. Computerland was getting their thousands of dollar fee, from you every month for the franchise. So my deal was extremely attractive, and that was important because what I wanted to do is I wanted to dominate the marketplace. Okay, I wanted to dominate computer retail. Okay, and for me to dominate the marketplace, I needed to have the best program out there. I needed to have the most attractive, the most affordable program for people to want to buy those stores, and that's why I was able to open as many stores as I physically possibly could, which by myself was 8 stores a month, before I ended up selling the operation or having to get more investment into it, to take it to higher levels, which it had the potential of doing, and I knew that, but trying to convince people out there that they could do that and make the investment. As I said, Pacific Stereo was one of the guys that I talked to. Charles Tandy was another one, a lot of times what these people thought is that we could do this ourselves. We don't need to buy this Byte Shop operation. Why would we do that? And so consequently, I had to find somebody that was that had some ulterior motivation to have retail stores, and that's what we eventually did. Is we eventually went to one of our suppliers was Logical Machine Corporation. As we got into the more sophisticated business aspect of sales in the stores, they came along with their Atom computer, which was a machine that anybody could program very easily because it didn't have programming languages. You could just tell the computer what you wanted it to do, and it would create the program. And it's kind of where artificial intelligence today is trying to do us, with everything we do and with our computers and our phones.
What'd you say? What'd you say the name of the computer was?
The
you say Atom?
It was called the Atom computer, yeah. And John Pierce was the founder of Logical Machine Corporation. He was operating up in San Mateo, California, and he was able to get Ben Swig. The Swig family was the family that owned the Fairmont Hotel chain. And so Ben Swig was his investor in Logical Machines. And Ben was very interested in what Logical and so forth. And he had deep pockets in terms of funds available, for some new expanding operations. So that was the major reason that I sold the Byte Shop operation to John Pierce at Logical Machines, because not only was he manufacturing the Atom computer with Logical Machines, but he also wanted a chain of stores to be able to sell those through and be able to control the chain of stores, for them to be his stores. So he ended up being the person that came up with the best offer for Byte Incorporated when Boyd Wilson and I sold the Byte operation. We ended up selling it to John, but there were, like I say, other people in the process that had the interest, but felt that they didn't have to need to take on the Byte operation.
Do you know whatever happened, with those stores? They bought the chain from you, and then what happened with them?
It's typical, it's the typical story of a takeover kind of thing. The first thing John Pierce did was he hired a consultant to come in and look at the Byte Shop operation. And the consultant was Jerry Brandt was his name. And so Jerry got the project from Logical Machines to go into the Byte Incorporated and look at the operation and determine what they needed to do going forward. And so Jerry basically took over the Byte business, and of course the first thing he did was to fire me. And that's typically what happens in a takeover, is that the visionary that started the business initially is being replaced by the new operation. And of course, they have different objectives than the visionary had when he was starting the operation. So they came in, and the very first thing they did was give me a termination. And then Jerry went out and hired another person to then come in and take over the Byte Shop franchise opportunity. And And of course, the thing that he wanted to do was eliminate my dealership program, which was very favorable to the new owners in lieu of a franchise program. And so Dave Pava was the individual that Jerry Brandt brought into the Byte Shop operation. And then Dave was tasked to go out to all of the Byte Shop stores that were in existence and convert them over to the Byte Shop franchise and pay their new fee schedules. And of course, what happened there was that if you look at the complexion of a Byte Shop owner, these are people that were pioneers in their own right, and created their own business. And so them felt no need to convert to a Byte Shop franchise. And so they just basically, terminated their agreements. Well, they had no agreement, for the franchise, and they wouldn't buy into a franchise. So some of them just continued on using the Byte Shop dealership program that they had, and others decided that it was an opportunity for them to go out and start their own chain of stores. And so we did have Byte Shops that converted. The best example I can give you is Jeff McKeever and Alan Hall in Arizona converted their Byte Shops of Arizona to micro age stores. And they created a whole chain of micro age stores from their Byte Shop operation. And then they went out and franchised the micro age stores, as well as they started a distribution company to provide product for their stores, and they were having their own purchasing relationships with all of the suppliers in the computer industry. So that they not only came out with a chain of stores, but they came out with one of the biggest distributors in personal computing. Was Pinnacore, was the name of their distribution operation, and they were out there with people like Ingram Micro D, and Ingram was the largest of the distributors as the market developed, and we got into the IBM era of products and that kind of growth, and of course networking and communication and all the other aspects of computers were becoming part of the day-to-day operations in a store. Education became a big thing with some of these chains of stores, where they would actually set up classrooms in their stores to educate the public coming in. And of course, with the IBM PC, that gave a lot of businesses the feeling that this was not going to be a flash in the pan. This was going to be something, if IBM is in it, it's going to last. And so that there was that endorsement there for people that normally wouldn't get involved with computers to actually bring computers into their business and into their operations.
I'd like to step back a little bit before you sold the chain, and I guess maybe I still have a couple of questions about that. But at one point, you actually tried to increase, I believe you tried to increase your profit margin by, and you mentioned this a couple of times, created your own computer called the Byte 8, as well as maybe there were some other things that you did to increase your profit margins. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah, to improve the profit margins for Byte Incorporated, and obviously, if I'm trying to raise capital, for the business, that's very important. They want to know what your cash flow is and your profit margins, and so by getting into building our own computer, the Byte 8 at Byte Manufacturing, and then selling those out to the stores, we were able to not only give the stores a better margin than they were getting from manufacturers, which was typically 25%. We would sell the Byte 8 computers to the Byte shops with a 50% margin on them. And so it gave the store profitability, as well as by being able to put sell or deliver Byte 8 computers versus an MSI or an Altair computer, there was more profit to Byte Incorporated at Byte Manufacturing. So our manufacturing arm was able to initially, the product was being delivered as a kit. And of course, all of our Byte shops had their backroom operations set up to build their own computers from kits. So that wasn't anything new for them. And so they were very incentivized to buy the Byte 8 computer because of the margin that they would get from that, and the sales of that versus the margins they would get from selling an MSI or an Altair, which were very similar type of products in terms of their capabilities. And of course, for Byte Incorporated, our profit margin was huge because we were just buying parts and putting them in a bag and shipping them with instructions for the kit, and that was it. That was all that was required. So we had no, assembly operations or anything like that at Byte. And since I was putting together the opening store inventory for all of the new Byte shops, I was very generous in terms of the amount of Byte 8 computers that the stores were going to get versus competitors to the Byte 8. So, but we made in the store inventory, we made sure that the store was getting, a processor tech Sol computer, an MSI 8080 computer, an Altair computer, as well as the Byte 8 computers. But once again, we were able to adjust the mix there, and so it was making the Byte Incorporated operation a lot more profitable than it would be without that. So people needed to understand that when we went out looking for investment and capital, that we pretty much controlled the whole operation, and felt like we were putting together something that was pretty significant and very desirable, in terms of, as I said, the dealerships were an easy sell, for the investment that was being made, and the fact that, everybody was looking at the franchises of Computerland as these guys are gouging us, and this dealership program is a slam dunk. They're supporting us in every way they can.
So I don't know much about the Byte 8 computer. Who designed that?
Actually, that's an interesting story. My next door neighbor in San Jose, California, worked for IBM as a computer design engineer, and he saw what I was doing. We were neighbors, lived right next door to each other, and so he would come over and we'd talk about things, and he said, I can design one of these things, and I said, really? And he said, yeah. He said, why don't I do that? And so that's what we did. My next door neighbor, first thing he did was he built the computer card that had the Intel microprocessor on it. And of course, the board format that he put the computer chip on was an S100 compatible board that would plug into an S100 bus. And so it was easy for us to put together, the case and the power supply, and then the motherboard that all the S100 cards would plug into. So it was a step-by-step process where the first card that he designed for me was the computer card, and then he did a memory card, and we had a number of cards that he would put together once again so that we could eliminate having to buy that capability, whatever that card was providing, whether it was the processor or memory or input and output. We didn't have to buy manufacturers' cards and pay their margins, their price. We would be able to get the same capability into the box at the cost of parts. And so the Byte 8, he was very key player in doing that, and he was just doing it moonlighting from IBM. So it wasn't costing me a lot of money to be able to come up with that. And that's kind of the business, the industry. There's a lot of networking going on like that, and I think we've talked in the past about how we've networked relationships and people that we knew, our lawyers and accountants and other people that you needed, but you didn't really have a lot of money to be able to pay these people. And same thing with, once again, design engineers. I had no intention of getting into that initially, but then, as you're growing the business and you see these opportunities come along, I was taking advantage of them.
So the Byte 8, did it run CP/M, or what was the operating system for that?
It was actually, everybody pretty much early on with the kits were using the Altair Basic. You would plug a teletype into it, and you'd take your paper tape of Altair Basic and load that in, and of course all of these Altair compatible computers would run that software. So that's where you would find that a lot of the people, the customers out there had access to, that software through their clubs and other resources in the marketplace. And it was free for them, so that's what they would do. But as we got into the more sophisticated products like the disk drives, you needed more storage capability to run the better programs, and so you could buy a floppy disk drive with a S100 bus card. We actually one of my retail competitors early on was over in Berkeley, California. I had a Byte Shop on University Avenue there, and then there was a guy by the name of Chuck Grant that opened up a Kentucky Fried Computers store up the street from me, and Chuck was competing with the Byte Shops there as an independent guy. But what he did was one of the things that was very beneficial in my relationship with Chuck was that he developed the first S100 bus card to utilize the Shugart 5¼ disk drive. And so, as I mentioned earlier, it was important for the Byte operation to dominate the marketplace with numbers of stores so we would be recognized by the different manufacturers. And one of those manufacturers that recognized potential with Byte Shop was Shugart when they came up with the design of the 5¼ floppy drive. I got a call from Don Massaro, who was the president of Shugart at the time, and Don's phone call was to me, and he was very concerned about, he owned 85% of the 8-inch floppy disk marketplace for all the mini computers that were out there in the market. and he would sell a 8-inch floppy drive to those customers for $1,200. Well, the price that he was coming up with for the 5.25-inch disk drive was $390. And so what Don was afraid of was that he was going to cannibalize his 8-inch floppy marketplace, which he had an 85% market share in, and how could he not do that? And so in his mind, what he wanted to do was develop a relationship with Byte Shop where we would be his exclusive customer for the 5.25-inch floppies. And so I entered into a purchase order agreement with Shugart, where I bought their total production capacity for the 5.25-inch disk drive, and they couldn't sell it to anybody else. And so Byte Shop got the first order, which I think was 150 5.25-inch disk drives, that we could take out to the marketplace now. We would be able to sell a $390 5.25-inch floppy that didn't have the capacity of the 8-inch floppies, but then once again it was hundreds of dollars and not thousands. So there was a real market for that. The problem that I ran into, though, and I hadn't foreseen in doing this purchase order with Shugart, was that I didn't have you were just buying the bare drive. That's what I was getting delivered from Shugart, and I didn't have an interface to plug into a computer, and also it was going to require software. As you indicated, CPM was a piece of software that would run on that configuration. So Chuck Grant at Kentucky Fried Computer had built his own S100 bus card for the 5.25-inch drive, but he had to come to me to get a drive, and I had to go to him to get an interface card. So we became very good friends once he had established the fact that he was going to do more than just Kentucky Fried Computers. And of course, Kentucky Fried Chicken came after him for that name also, like Computer Shack and Computerland. So they ended up changing the name of the store. But at the same time, he came out with his new company was called North Star, and North Star was the manufacturing company that was building the S100 card. And that was his initial product. And of course, with that card, he could then go off and do a similar thing that I did with the Byte 8, where he made his own North Star computer. And then he actually took it to the point where he created his own operating system that was the North Star operating system for the North Star Horizon, was what he called his computer. And it had that S100 bus card in it. And on the Byte Shop side of it, or the Byte Incorporated side of it, was that I went to Digital Resources in Pacific Grove and bought the CPM operating system that we could offer with the 5.25-inch floppies that we had. So it took not just the drive from Shugart, but it took the S100 bus card and the CPM operating system to really make that a successful product for the stores. So we had about a 90-day to 6-month kind of hiatus in terms of getting this together, point where it was really going to be a mass marketed product. But once again, because I was selling to my Byte shops that were very technically capable in themselves, they were able to work through this configuration that we had to put together to get a usable floppy disk drive system to our customers, to the end users out there that were coming into the stores. And And so one of my problems was that all of a sudden the next shipment of 5 1/4 inch drives from Shugart wasn't 150, it was 500, and all of a sudden I'm getting pallet loads of these drives, and the demand for just a drive only was very small. So Don and I had to sit down and rethink what we were doing in terms of me having the exclusive for the drive. But he was able to successfully navigate that transition by using the byte operation and not cannibalizing his 8-inch business. And of course, he scaled that down as he ramped up the 5 1/4. So they were very successful in what they were doing, and eventually sold Shugart to Xerox Corporation, came in and bought their operation. And of course, Shugart then went off and got involved in doing hard disk drives and so forth.
So, Paul, do you know how many Byte 8 computers you actually ended up making, or how many kits you ended up making?
I don't. I really don't know how that went. It was short-lived in a sense that when Logical Machine took over, they had no interest in manufacturing the Byte 8 computer anymore, or they wanted to sell Atom computers, in the bytes, and so they weren't going to pursue that for very much longer. And I'm not sure, how important the Byte 8 was for Dave Pava, who was out trying to sell Byte Shop franchises. At that point, it really, the focus gets out of focus, and so the operation of Byte Shops, after my tenure there, was in my mind very negative. Obviously I got a lot of calls from dealers owners that I had put in business as a dealership, asking me what I thought and what they should do and so forth. And of course, I had moved on at that point to Exedy and doing the Sorcerer computer. So, I had those interests in mind, and so I was promoting, to any dealer or any computer store that I was working with, to go in the direction of the Sorcerer computer and the personal computers, of that venue. And we eventually did the same thing at Exedy in terms of the Sorcerer having the capability of floppy disk drives. And initially it was all of these early computers, the Tandy, the Apple, the TRS-80, the Commodores. The storage devices we were using was a cassette recorder, okay? And so, it had very limited capability in terms of what it could do in terms of loading program or storing data. And so you wanted to get into a floppy disk environment as quickly as you could, add on to that. And of course, all of the manufacturers, Exedy, Apple, Commodore, we all, Tandy, we all went with the 5 1/4-inch floppy, and then eventually to hard drives as well.
Do you still have a Byte 8 today?
Yeah, I do. I've got a Byte 8 computer. I've got.
Is it assembled, or is it just the kit?
Yeah, it's an assembled unit. I can run it, and once again with S100 bus cards, I can interchange. I actually have a Sol 20 and my Byte 8. I've got an Altair, in my collection. I don't have a lot of things, but the ones that interested me the most were that. And of course, the Equity Sorcerer was, was really the love of my life there.
Right.
That developed in many different ways, which I think we discussed, in the Equity segments about taking that internationally and having other manufacturers co-licensing and so forth. So that was a whole other era. And once again, before IBM, before 1982 when IBM came in and with their PC and literally, did a number on all of the companies that were in the business at the time.
Indeed they did. Indeed they did. So I had a couple of final questions about the sale. So what was your goal? I guess, what was your impetus for selling it? Why did you want to sell the chain? And it sounds as though you didn't really intend to get away from the stores necessarily, but that you wanted to sell the chain. Is that accurate?
Well, it was my initial intent on investment was to get a venture capitalist to come in and just as Apple had done with Don Valentine and Arthur Rock, get them involved with it, and continue to be the chairman of the board and the CEO of Byte Incorporated. But the problem that I was having in doing that, and I even hired a business consultant. Once again, we didn't have a lot of money to spend on these other things because, we were running that whole operation of manufacturing and dealerships. So I had limited, not only time, but limited money to deal in that area. So I got a consultant to come in and help me with the venture capital side of things. And then I had people that I had met in the past that were wanting to make investments that had come into my store and introduce themselves and so forth, like Don Valentine or Tom Perkins was another one. Perkins Kleiner was another venture capital company up in San Francisco that was making investments in that area. And so Tom and I got together and talked about him coming in and making an investment. And I was, interested in maybe giving up 25% of the company's shares for an investment, in the range of, $500,000, and then with that kind of investment in the company, we would be able to continue to buy inventory at the level that we were growing the stores, and which at the time was 8 stores a month. So we were running into financial issues at Byte was the fact that we were cash strapped to the point where the inventory that we could purchase was limited, and so we needed to get equity capital to allow us to grow to the level we could. And so venture capital was the first thing, but the proposition that I got from Perkins Kleiner was that they didn't want to make an equity investment. They wanted to make an investment of subordinated capital. And basically what that is doing an agreement where they're basically loaning me money, and their initial offer was to loan me $300,000 of cash to take care of my inventory situation. But what they wanted was shares of stock, because they did loan me the money, but they wanted payback of the money as well as equity. And, I was just interested in selling the shares, for equity and not having to pay back, that was cash in and not a loan that I was going to have to repay and have that on our books. So that was my foray with venture capital. And then once again, as I mentioned, The other thing was to find investors that could take advantage of what I had developed the Byte Incorporated to be with a chain of stores, and hence the conversations that I had with Radio Shack, Charles Tandy, and with John Peers and so forth. And John was the one that obviously Charlie went off and did his own thing with the Tandy stores, and John was the one that stepped up and actually bought basically bought the shares that Boyd Wilson and I had in Byte Inc. and then they folded it into Logical Machines, and we got Logical Machines stock and cash. So that was kind of our exit out of it. Although Boyd did stay with the Byte operation in a sense that he was running at that time. If you recall, back in the early days there, we had the rep company Repco, and then we had, I had the Byte Shop in Mountain View. And as we developed Byte manufacturing and we got warehouse space and offices elsewhere from the original Byte Shop in Mountain View, Boyd took that store over and he ran that. So part of the sales agreement was to give Boyd the Byte Shop in Mountain View for his continued employment, and my continued employment for as long as it lasted was to be the CEO of Byte operation under Logical Machines. But as I said, they terminated that, so I moved on to bigger and better things for myself.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm curious, as we wrap things up here, just what your thoughts are about how important those early retail stores were in that personal computer revolution that was going on at the time.
Well, I think the significance of computer retail was dominant. I mean, it was we were the ones that were going to make it happen. It couldn't be done with mail order. The support required, for this sophisticated of a product, you had to have outlets that people could come into and so forth. So retail stores were a big part of that. And as the marketplace for computers evolved and we got into computer communication and networking, and eventually the internet came along, and which was the government had developed this DARPANet, and then which was for government use and research and so forth, which was then converted to the internet, and we were able to do emails and the early days of communication. Communication was taking over, and so the retail stores were still places, where people could go and as I said, they started to evolve with education in the stores, and so people could learn in the stores. And I think today, if you look at Apple, for instance, that's a good example. The Apple stores out there, Steve Jobs was, went from manufacturing computers to evolving the form factor, and he was a real clever guy to embrace it all and actually control it all too. Keep it from the competitors, in a sense that everything he was doing was proprietary and so forth. And I think if you look at Apple stores today, they're the most successful retailer out there in the world, and they're selling computer products, phone products, whatever you call a phone today. It's a computer. So it's a camera, it's a computer, it's everything you need. And so retail was definitely the beginning of it. And as the internet came along, you saw the stores go to the internet, and I was involved early on in the when Vice President Gore came out with the phrase the super information highway was the internet, and he was behind it, and this was going to be our future. Well, I looked at the future of the super highway as needing a computer store out there, and so many people jumped on board with the internet and created storefronts, of all sorts, buy.com, and once again, Hardware Street was the name of the store chain that I was involved with, but we were able to sell computers directly to the public, through that media, and that was a step that happened, between that and what we see today with the Google and Meta and Facebook and all of these other operations that are selling on the internet. I mean, anymore, with once again the computer capabilities with artificial intelligence and their ability to know what we are doing all the time. I mean, this video that we're doing right here, I know this camera that I'm looking into is Google is recording as well as you are everything that we're talking about and doing, so I'm sure tomorrow I'm going to be getting all kinds of new offers in my email.
Probably, yeah, that's true.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah. I mean, you can't get away from it. There's no doubt in my mind. One of the most impressive things that I thought happened during the era there was the ad that Chiat Day put together with Apple for the introduction of the Macintosh, and the ad where they have Big Brother taking over. IBM's come into the marketplace, and they're there with their Mac, and Big Brother is going to know what's going on, and we're in Big Brother territory today. I'll tell you that.
That's for sure. Well, Paul, I want to thank you for a very fascinating story about the Byte Shop. I mean, I think it's been incredible. I think we've all learned a lot about the way early retail stores were run, and just how important they were to the entire evolution and where we are today. So, anything else you want to say before we hop off here?
I would just like to say that, in the development of the Byte shops and Byte manufacturing, that it was important, to survive, with all the changes that were going on. And so I thought it was important in our series, of segments we've done about that to have this final segment talk a bit about the business side of things. That you have to keep your eye on the ball, and it was important that there's only 24 hours in a day, and I'm only one person. And when you're doing all of the things that I was doing with Byte shops and Byte and Byte Incorporated, with the manufacturing, the raising of capital, and all of that to survive, I think it's an important message here. That well, there's a couple of things that I have beliefs in. One of them is you'll succeed to your level of incompetence, and I've always done that. And you need to at some point turn your business over to the people that are more competent at the level that the business is in, and then also a big supporter of nothing happens until there's a sale. And I think that that's the story of Apple. It was we gave them that first sale, and then they were able to take that sale and make that corporation what it is today from that. And I think anybody starting a business needs to think about that. Whether it's a service or whether it's a product, you need to think before you go out and spend a lot of money, of your money or other people's money. Think about the saleability of that product. Go out and try and sell the product before you've made it even. I experimented a little bit of that in some of the things that I did going forward, and literally talked about having this product and talking to customers, would you buy it, sort of thing. And I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. And so hopefully through the series that we've done here of the Byte Shops and Byte Incorporated, we've gotten that message across, and some of the trials and tribulations that I went through with that. And once again, I did take it forward to other companies that I started. So yeah, it wasn't the end, but at any rate, that's what I have to offer.
Yeah, and we have other we have other topics that we wanted to explore as well, but I think we've done a great job talking about the Byte Shop itself, and hopefully everybody enjoyed this. So thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate it.
Okay, my pleasure. Have a good day.
All right, that's it for this episode. I want to give special thanks to Paul Terrell for taking the time to talk with me about the Byte Shop. And again, that is the completion of our discussion about the Byte Shop, but we have other topics that we will discuss with Paul Terrell. Also, I want to thank Simon McCullough for recording his Meet the Listener segment. I thought that was great. And I want to thank all of you for listening. I provided links in the show notes for all the great websites we discussed during this podcast. Just go to floppydays.com for the full list. I very much encourage you always to provide feedback for the show. You can do that in many, many ways. You can do it at Apple Podcasts. You can do it from the website. You can do it via email at floppydays@gmail.com, via Twitter at floppydays, on Mastodon at floppydays@oldbytes.space, on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/floppydays, or on the Discord server, whose link is at floppydays.com. Besides the primary locations of the website, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, Floppy Days is available for streaming at TuneIn, Amazon Music, and Spotify. Until the next show, pull out a vintage computer and compute as if it were yesterday. Bye.